Hi everyone and welcome to Kinesiology 415, Eating Disorders and Weight Control in Sport. My name is Jessica Duan Rodriguez and I will be your professor for the semester. If there, for any reason, are any questions that you guys have, go ahead and shoot me an email. Due to the online nature of this course, I won't have any official office hours or be meeting with you guys face to face, but I will always be available via email. So if there are any questions that ever arise, please don't hesitate to email me. My email, as you can see on the screen, is jduhon@csusm.edu. Okay, and so what I want to do for this first of many weekly audio lectures is first we're going to go over the course and how the course is going to be outlined, how the flow of the course is going to go, what's going to be expected of you, what kind of assignments you're going to have, and then we'll get into our first little bit of lecture material for the semester. Okay. So if you guys have located the syllabus on Cougar Courses, you should be able to download that and follow along with me as we go over what's expected from the course. If you look at the top of the syllabus, you can see my information there. Again, no official office hours, but always will be available via email, okay? jduhon@csusm.edu, okay? As we go along, the course description is there for you guys. You can go ahead and read that just to provide you with a little bit of background of what we're going to be talking about. But this course will focus on weight management, weight control, body composition, and a big portion will be devoted to eating disorders and some of it looking at exercise disorders and kind of why we see that in sport and how we can combat those issues as well. Okay. The required text is listed there for you. We are using eating disorders in sport. The author is Thompson, and the ISBN number is listed there for you. It is available at the CSUSM bookstore as well as Amazon, or you can order it straight from the Human Kinetics website as well. There are also some recommended readings there for you guys. Again, this is not required, but if you are looking for some additional information, just to help you study, or just if you'd like some more resources on the topics that we discuss, these are available for you to look into as well. I will be posting weekly slides and other materials that you may need to utilize throughout the semester on Cougar Courses, so make sure that you are staying up to date with what's being posted. Every week a new module will open. You can probably see right now, if you look on your Cougar Courses homepage, for the course, it is divided into weeks, and every Monday a new module will open. Okay, so each module will contain the necessary information for that week, consisting of all assignments. It'll have your course notes, and it will have your audio lectures that you need to listen to for that week, divided up weekly. Okay, so make sure you are staying up to date on what's coming up in the course and what's necessary for that week. As we continue with the syllabus here, you can see the course objectives there are listed. Again, this is going to tell you once you finish this course, this is what we should have covered, and this is what you should be able to have a good understanding of and to be able to reiterate back to me after learning everything in this course. Okay, more learning objectives listed for you there. Attendance and participation. Due to the online nature of this course, attendance will not be monitored, and participation will be evaluated via your weekly discussion. Okay, if you have opened the module for this week, you will see that there is a discussion up there and ready for you guys to start posting in. Okay, so when we're talking about the discussions every week, there will be a discussion that is posted on Cougar Courses where you will need to make a response and add to the thread of discussion based on the prompt that is given to you. And then you'll also have to give a minimum of 2 responses to 2 other students in the course, okay? So you will give a response to the original prompt and then also respond to 2 students. So in this, you must also include at least one source that's properly formatted in APA format. Now, a lot of this may be giving your opinion, or it may be based on a lot of factual evidence as well, but you will be graded on the depth and the thoughtfulness of your answer and how thorough you are in answering the question. Okay. Also, when you are responding to other students' post on the discussion board, make sure that you are not just stating that you agree with what they're saying. If there is some form of opinion-based response in that, but give a discussion as to why you agree and to why you think it may be important to what we're studying. Okay, all discussions will be due, or all discussion forums will close on Sundays at 11:59 p.m. Okay, so you have from Monday when the discussion opens until Sunday at 11:59 p.m. to formulate your responses. There will be no late responses accepted for your discussions, okay? So when it closes at 11:59 p.m., make sure you do have those responses in, okay? And that's how participation will be monitored throughout this course. Okay, moving on to assignments. So there are going to be three main assignments that are in this course. You will be expected to have these due when they are assigned in the modules and on the course syllabus. Any late work will receive a deduction of 10 points per day and will not be accepted after it's been a week past its due date. Okay. All right, so looking at the assignments here, we can see that we have three of them listed. We have our food diary and questionnaire, our media image assignment, and our pro anorexia and bulimia assignment. Okay, now as the semester goes on, I will provide you guys with a lot more information as to what these assignments do entail, and that will be provided for you guys in the audio lectures and also on Cougar courses with some instructions for you guys. But just as an overview, for your food diary and questionnaire, you will need to keep a record of your food intake for a total of 7 days. Again, the information for this assignment will be posted on Cougar Courses with a 7-day food diary template for you guys to fill in. And after completing the food diary template and explaining to me what you've eaten over the course of a 7-day period, you will answer some questions relating to your intake, okay? Again, all this information will be located on Cougar Courses for you guys, okay? Number two, the media image assignment. As we get into this course, we will discuss the media and its effect on our body image, its effect on our eating patterns, on what the perception of an athlete is. And so we will have what I'm calling the media image assignment, where you will need to collect a minimum of 5 positive and 5 negative media images from various outlets. Okay, so you can use maybe print media, it could be from a commercial, it can be from the internet, it can be basically anything that is a form of advertisement or is in the media showing either something positive or something negative about body image, about how we view athletes, how we view women, how we view men. Okay, so really just looking at how the media depicts us. Okay. With this, you will also need to turn in the images and a description as to why you thought this was a positive image or a negative image. Okay, again, more instructions on that to follow on Cougar Courses. The third assignment is going to be your pro anorexia and pro bulimia assignment. Okay, for this assignment, it will consist of you guys looking at some individual websites that are pro anorexia and pro bulimia, and then writing a reflection to kind of what your experience was while going through those websites. Okay, again, the assignment will be completed all via Cougar Courses. All right, when we're looking at our exams, all exams in this course will be worth 50 points. And it's with the exception of the final exam, which will be worth 100 points. Okay. All the exams are going to consist of lecture material, any of the readings that we may have had, and any additional readings or videos and things that I do post on Cougar Courses. The final exam will be cumulative for this course, okay? So you need to make sure that you are staying up to date with the information, that once you learn something, you just don't forget it learn it for the exam, then forget it, because you will most likely see it coming up on their final exam. Okay, all exams will be given through Cougar Courses, and there will not be any makeup exams unless there is an emergency situation, and that has been, any documentation for that has been provided to the instructor. All right, so looking at the grade breakdown and scale, you can see we have our various assignments at 75 points. Exams 1 through 3 will be a total of 150 points, with your final exam at 100, giving us a grand total of 325 points. Right? Your grades will be given, your letter grades will be given based on the scale below. So once we're going throughout the course, you guys can use this scale to kind of see where you're at in the grading range and what your possible final letter grade would be. Okay. As you guys know, there is a writing requirement for the university, and this part of this course will fulfill part of that writing requirement. One thing that I do want to point out is that there will be some sensitive material that we will be discussing in this course. We will be talking a lot about body image, about eating disorders, about why people choose eating disorders, some psychological things that are behind that. So we will be talking about some sensitive information, okay? And because the nature of this class doesn't really allow a lot of things to be discussed, I do encourage you guys to discuss it among yourselves. If you need to talk to someone else about things, there may be some disturbing things that we talk about. So please make sure that you are discussing these things outside of just the forums, but also with each other and possibly other instructors, or also myself via email. Okay, if we continue on in the syllabus, you can see the tips for how to excel in this class. You guys can go ahead and read through those points. Helpful information on how you can study and be prepared to really get a good passing grade in this class. Right? If you do have any sort of disability and you're registered with State Disabled Student Services, please let me know so we can get the proper paperwork so that we can get you all the services that you require. Okay. We have an academic honesty policy at this university, so any of the assignments that you do submit, we are expecting that they are your own work. So make sure that you guys are being honest and not plagiarizing and not copying and things of that matter. Okay, you guys are all adults. You've been in college for a while, and it's expected that everything is your own work. Okay, you guys should be used to that. All right, so now we move on to the tentative class schedule. As you guys can see, it is divided into weeks, okay? So we have weeks 1 through 15, and then your final exam week as well, which is on the next slide. But basically, everything that you will need for each week will be in each module, okay? There will be your lecture slides, as well as the audio lectures that I will be posting every week. All assignments, all discussions will be within that 1 week, okay? Every Monday at 12 a.m., the next module will open, and you will have until Sunday at 12:59 p.m. to finish all the material in that particular module, okay? As you see, your activities and assignments and the day that they are due are going to be all the way to that far column titled Activity and Assignments. Make sure that you guys are staying up to date on that. And Cougar Courses will also give you guys a cutoff date, and it should give you when the assignment is actually due on there as well. So you shouldn't be missing any due dates. At week 4, we'll have exam 1. At week 6, we'll have exam 2. Week 12, we'll have exam 3. And then finals week will be your final examination. Okay, please take note that on March 20th, we do have spring break, so that week you will not have any modules or any assignments to complete for spring break. Right? So again, if we continue, next slide just shows the end of the semester with our finals week happening in May on the 15th through the 9th. All right, so that's kind of how the course is going to flow throughout the semester. So again, if you have any questions on the syllabus or assignments, please also just, again, feel free to email me. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone over what's expected and how this course is going to run, we're going to get into our first lecture. Okay, the first lecture, we're going to talk about nutrition, energy balance, and body composition. Now, if you guys have had a nutrition class before, a lot of this may be a little bit of kind of review for you. But again, I want to make sure that you guys have a good understanding of what proper nutrition, proper energy balance, and how we measure body composition and such is on the importance of that. So that once we go into obesity and other topics that we'll talk about, looking at body image and body dysmorphic disorder and anorexia, you'll have a good kind of background on what it's actually supposed to be compared to things that could be a little bit off or a little bit disorganized. Okay, so let's start off with energy balance. Okay, now when we're thinking about the topic of weight control is going to depend on calories, right? It's going to be dependent upon our energy balance, on basically our calories in versus our calories out. Okay, so when we're thinking about energy balance, it is that relationship of calories consumed with the amount of calories expended. Okay, now there are three different categories of energy balance that we can have. We can have a neutral energy balance, we can have a positive energy balance, or we can have a negative energy balance. Okay, now that neutral energy balance is going to be where the calories that we consume or the food that we take in equals the amount of calories that we burn, or the amount of physical activity that we perform that allows us to get rid or to utilize the energy that we've consumed through our food intake. Okay. When we look at our positive energy balance, this is going to be when the amount of food that we take in, or the amount of energy, the amount of calories that we put in our bodies is actually greater than the amount that we expend with physical activity. Okay, so in this instant, our calories in is going to be greater than our calories out. And again, when we look at negative energy balance, we can see it's basically going to be the opposite of that positive energy balance, right? So we're going to have the calories in is going to be less than the calories out. Okay, now one thing I want you guys to note is that there is a few different reasons why we would actually want a positive energy balance, okay? Usually with a positive energy balance, we see that individuals gain weight, okay? You have more calories than you're expending, so weight gain is usually the result, okay? But there are some necessary circumstances to have a positive energy balance, okay? It is necessary for growth in infancy, growth in childhood, and also for pregnancy. Okay, so when a woman has conceived and she is growing a child inside of her, we want to make sure that she does have enough calories to actually provide for that growing baby. Okay, another area where we would want a positive energy balance is an athlete who is in a stage of muscle gain. Okay, we would never want an athlete who is trying to gain muscle to have that negative calorie balance, because when we're in the negative calorie energy balance stage, that is when we see weight loss. Okay, so every time we are trying to lose weight, we need to make sure that we are in that negative energy balance stage. Okay, and one last thing to take note about when we're talking about energy balance is that we are looking at the amount of calories consumed within a 24-hour period. Okay, and this is one thing that I want you guys to look at when you do that um, food diary and questionnaire, right? So you're going to be looking at your food intake over those 7-day periods, okay? So making sure that you're keeping a good record of your intake. It is harder to determine caloric expenditure due to some of the physiological processes that we have to take into account. So making sure that we have, a good record of how many calories you're taking in each day throughout the day can help us get a good estimate of how much energy you do need per day to either maintain your weight, gain weight, or lose weight. Okay. Some of those physiological processes that we have to take into account is breathing, blood circulation, your temperature regulation, digestion, and absorption. Okay. Now these don't really take up a, as large of amount as our physical activity would, but it is a pretty big indicator, or has a pretty big impact on our caloric expenditure. Okay, now when we're thinking about energy balance, we have the neutral energy balance, the positive and the negative. But one thing that we also have to take into account is chronic positive energy balance, okay? And so I said earlier that our positive energy balance usually leads to weight gain. But when we're in that state of chronic positive energy balance, that's when we usually see individuals going into the overweight stage and the obese stage. Okay, and it's important to note that those short-term changes in caloric intake and expenditure that we have, say maybe skipping a meal a day or not exercising one day and maybe exercising a little bit more the next day, those changes in the short term are highly unlikely to cause significant changes in our weight. Okay, we can kind of make up for those deficits, or those maybe you had a little bit extra dessert or something. We can make up for those little short-term changes. It's when we really get into that chronic stage where it's overly elevated for a longer period of time when we see the effects, okay, when we see the overweight and when we see the obesity coming into play. Okay, and we also have chronic negative energy balance where we see extreme weight loss. And this is something that we might see in the case of our anorexic or bulimic individuals. Now, one way that we look at or kind of classify our energy balance is we look at our body mass index, or our BMI. And the way we look at this is it's our weight in kilograms divided by our height in meters squared, okay? And so what this is going to do for us is it's going to provide an estimate of our body fatness, okay? It's not going to give the percentage of body fat, but it is going to provide us with a ratio of looking at kind of what is our weight compared to our height. Now, BMI is not always the best type of indicator to use, but it is the best that we have at the moment, okay, in the scientific field, or in the field of nutrition, okay. We do look at it in classifying underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obesity. But what we see is that BMI may misclassify individuals, especially athletes, when you're looking at their weight versus their height. Okay, say we have a bodybuilder and that individual is very muscular, and when we look at that, muscle is going to weigh more than fat. So that individual may have a higher body weight as opposed to someone who may have a little bit more body fat. Okay. But when we look at their BMI, it may classify them in the overweight or obese category. However, when we look at them compared to their percentage of body fat, we would see that this is not the case. Okay, so this is one indication where BMI may not be the best tool to use, especially with athletes. But overall, it is the most, I guess, widespread or well-known indicator that we do have to classify individuals based on their body weight for energy balance purposes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about a neutral energy balance and some weight maintenance strategies that we do have. Okay, so again, neutral energy balance is going to be that calories in versus those calories out, and they're going to be equal. Okay, so really in that neutral energy balance state, you should not see any weight gain or any weight loss. Okay, now when we look at this, we see that as people do age, weight gain can occur due to many reasons. Okay, we can see that it could be a drop in their metabolism. It could also be nutritional decisions that people are making as they age. Maybe they're as their body's changing, they're not making the best nutritional decisions for themselves. And we also see that as people age, we see a lot more inactivity. Okay, so people aren't moving around as much. If you think about the elderly population, we can see that you know, as people age, they're not getting outdoors as much. They may have less muscle mass. They may also start having maybe some other contraindications that could prevent them from being active. So we do see this drop in inactivity that can give us that change in our energy balance state. Okay, and now, although this may seem very simple as maintaining neutral energy balances, calories in, calories out, we still do see many overweight and obese individuals, okay? The rate of childhood obesity right now is about 30%. And what we see in adults is that about 67% of adults in the US are obese. Okay, so 30% for children with a rate at 67% for adults. Okay, so moving on with this neutral energy balance and weight maintenance strategies, we see that the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, or the NHANES study, found that in 25 to 44-year-olds, that men gained about 3.4% of their body weight per 10 years, with women gaining about 5.2% per 10 years, okay? So this is basically saying that, you know, without even trying, just because of the things that happen in our metabolism, the inactivity that we see as we age, and those nutrition choices, that we see weight gain happening just as we age, okay? So if we look at an example of this, if we have a typical 6 foot, 170-pound man at 25, that individual would be around 182 pounds at age 45, okay? So that's a 12-pound weight gain within those years, okay? If we're looking at the women, we see this would be a typical 120-pound woman at 25 would have a 13-pound weight gain at 133 pounds at 45, okay? And this is just due to that inactivity. It's due to the changes that occur in metabolism and not maintaining that neutral energy balance, okay? What we also see is that the susceptibility to permanent weight gain seems to be highest during adolescence, pregnancy, and midlife in women, and after marriage for men, okay? So in women, we're seeing that during their young adult stages, when they are having a baby, and when they're in that 30 to 40, 40 to 50 range, in that midlife range, we see that's where they're actually gaining the most weight. Okay, and then with men, we see after marriage is when they usually gain the most weight. Okay, and also it's important to note that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found that adults that are older than 60 were more likely to be obese than younger adults. Okay, so when looking at this neutral energy balance, it's important to figure out where kind of the shift is occurring, okay, so that we can best combat it with maintenance strategies in order to help these individuals maintain their weight and not see that weight gain occurring. Okay, so let's talk about a few factors that may contribute to weight gain that occur with aging. Okay, so we did say that there's that change in metabolism, the inactivity, and the nutritional habits, but let's get a little bit more into detailed about that. Okay, so we do see that we have what we call the loss of muscle mass and the gain of fat as we age. Okay, so individuals begin to not see hypertrophy or not see muscle mass growth, but we actually see sarcopenia and we see the reduction of muscle mass. Okay, and after age 60, steady loss in muscle mass and gain of fat is equal to the decreased amount of calories we burn. Okay, so we do see a correlation there. Okay, so as we have a decrease in amount of calories burned due to inactivity, we see that that correlates with that loss of muscle mass. Okay, also lower levels of activity, eating too many calories, also certain medications and unhealthy habits such as lack of sleep or skipping meals, we see that that also has an effect on our ability to gain weight as we get older. Okay, so let's talk about a few ways, our keys to weight maintenance over time. So as we age, how do we help to reduce this weight gain and keep that that neutral energy balance? Okay, so one way that we can look at this is to control caloric intake and emphasize exercise. Okay, control caloric intake. One way to do this is to use our feelings of fullness and hunger to guide our intake. A lot of times, and we'll even talk about this a little bit when we're going into the eating disorders, is what we see is that individuals kind of have emotional eating, bored eating. They eat kind of mindlessly, okay, and not really using the guidance of their fullness and their hunger to help them control their caloric intake. Okay. Also emphasizing exercise, specifically strength training and muscle building. Okay. Strength training and muscle building helps to maintain metabolically active muscles. When we have a metabolically active muscle, we'll see that we're able to burn more energy, which will increase our calories out, okay, giving us more of that either neutral or negative energy balance as opposed to the positive energy balance. So one thing that we want to do as individuals age is we want to make sure they are maintaining their muscle mass. Okay. And then also when we're talking about emphasizing exercise, we want to look at cardiovascular physical activity, okay? Not just strength training, not just lifting weights, but also how efficient is our cardiovascular system and how much are we activating it or making it work, okay? So we do know that a high level of energy expenditure will help to prevent increased fat mass, okay? So what we see is that the more fit or the more cardiovascular fit you are with the increased amount of cardiovascular exercise that you have, the more likely you are to prevent increased fat mass. And when that is utilized along with strength training, we see an extra kind of boost of loss of fat mass as we see that muscle mass building and that more metabolically active muscle coming into play. Okay, so when we're looking at cardiovascular physical activity, it's recommended that children get about 60 minutes of physical activity daily. And adults, it's recommended that they get at least 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity and 70 or 7 excuse me, let me repeat that. So it's at least 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity exercise performed in sessions of at least 10 minutes. Okay, so two ways to do it. You can look at it if an individual wants to get more of a moderate intensity going. versus more of a vigorous intensity going, or some kind of maybe high intensity interval training with sessions of at least 10 minutes, getting in that whole 75 minutes per week. Okay, but that is what has been shown to produce the greatest cardiovascular benefits of maintaining that decreased fat mass along with the increased muscle mass. Okay, so let's move on to a positive energy balance. Okay, we said earlier that a chronic positive energy balance is going to equal overweight and obesity over the long term. Okay, now again, I do want to point out that normal, or that it will be normal to have a positive energy balance during infancy, because we want the child to grow, or the infant to grow. It will also be in childhood, because again, the individual is still growing, and we do want to see it in pregnancy, as the mother needs to be able to provide for the growing child. Okay, but what I also want to point out is that overweight and obesity is not just an issue that we see here in the United States. It is becoming more of a worldwide epidemic. And what we see is that we have health problems related to overweight and obesity in about 1.4 billion of the people ages 20 years or older that are overweight. Okay, and we see that approximately 5 million of these individuals that have health problems that are related to some form of positive energy balance, those individuals would be classified as obese. Okay, and remember, this is using that BMI classification. So again, when you're looking at an individual that's an athlete, say a bodybuilder or a football player, that may not be the best indication of their percentage of body fat, or kind of even their distribution of body fat, because it will overestimate that fat depending on how muscular that individual is, because muscle does weigh more than fat. Okay. And what we also see is that when we look at older adults that might be relatively frail, we do see it underestimates their fat. Okay, because these individuals will be typically a normal weight, because they do lose muscle mass through sarcopenia. We do see that they have a higher fat content, but because fat does not weigh as much as muscle, they'll still be normal weight, therefore underestimating their fat content. All right, and just looking at negative energy balance a little bit closer, again, this is when those fewer calories are consumed than we actually expend through physical activity or just daily functioning of the body. And one thing that I do want to point out is this can occur by conscious effort or by decreased nutrient absorption. Okay, so it could be the individual is consciously choosing not to eat or not to consume the calories, or they're consciously giving some effort to expend more calories than they've consumed. Okay, so that would be exercising maybe at a higher rate than they actually should, to make sure that those calories expended are more than what they've taken in. Okay, or it could be occurring by decreased nutrient absorption, which could be caused by some form of gut issue that we see in the GI tract. Maybe it's some sort of GI disorder, or something that's going on in that digestive system. Okay, so that would be kind of hindering the absorption of those nutrients. So then fewer calories would be absorbed, therefore making the more calories expended. One area that we really see this negative energy balance coming into play is with fad diets. Okay, you guys have probably all heard of various fad diets that we can go on. Thinking about, I don't know, Atkins or paleo, gluten-free. I mean, the list is relatively extensive. Okay, and one thing that these fad diets do provide is it does provide that negative energy balance, but it also only provides a limited degree of short-term weight loss. Okay, fad diets are usually very hard to follow in the long run, and what they really do is they all promise big weight loss, and they all use that negative energy balance to achieve it. Okay, but again, usually, when we classify a diet as a fad diet, they are hard to follow in the long term. And what we usually see is that individuals maybe lose a few pounds or maybe lose weight in the beginning. It could be water weight due to taking out carbohydrates and things like that. But what we usually see is they rebound back to their normal weight or their previous weight, and even maybe a little bit heavier than they were before, due to the diets being extremely hard to follow. Okay, so always want to be aware of those fad diets when we're looking at negative energy balance, because the way we can kind of indicate a fad diet is that it will promise significant weight loss due to a negative energy balance in a very short amount of time. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about nutrition and body composition. Okay, so this class is talking specifically toward athletes and kind of weight management and body composition, and looking at eating disorders in the athlete. So one thing that athletes do strive to do is to optimize their nutrition and improve or modify their body composition in some way. Okay, it could be maybe becoming more muscular, it could be maybe slimming down and trimming down to meet a weight class, whatever it may be. The athletes are usually always striving to have their best performance and be the best physically that they can be. Okay. Now, when we're looking at body composition, even related to athletes, health screenings can help us identify possible risk factors. Okay, so we always need to make sure that we're taking into account the health of the individual, even if they are athletes. Okay. Because not all athletes are built the same. Not all athletes are going to have the same genetic makeup, the same family history, and the same needs, okay, as when looking at their nutrient intake or even their exercise expenditure, okay? So an athlete's needs are best going to be met through consultation, or actually in collaboration with another health professional, okay? So as a nutrition professional, you need to make sure that you are getting all the facts and all the identifying all the risk factors for that individual athlete to be able to provide them with the most efficient, also the most knowledgeable information that you have to optimize their nutrition and improve or modify their body as compared to their sport. Okay, so when looking at nutrition and body composition of athletes, making sure that we are doing health screenings, and that we are kind of figuring out the best way to meet each athlete's individual needs, so that that individual can be healthy in their body as they perform. Okay. So when we are looking at body composition, we need to talk about body composition assessments. Okay, so really when we're looking at this, a discussion of body composition and goal setting in relation to general weight loss, loss of body fat, gain in muscle mass, or maintaining current weight can help to achieve realistic ideals, and is an important component of the fitness and nutrition plan of athletes. Okay, so you never really want to just kind of look over the body composition assessment. Okay, when we look at body composition, the nutritional goals of the athlete are going to be directly tied to weight management and optimization of their body composition. Okay, so when we are looking at our body composition assessments, this will help us gain a baseline for each athlete. Okay, so it will be kind of a marker of fitness. Okay, and it's very convenient to assess, and it will give us an understanding of where our athlete is in relation to where they want to be. Okay, and this is in their body composition. So looking at muscle mass, fat content, and basic structure of our athlete. Okay, so we never want to disregard the body composition assessment. Those nutritional goals, what we recommend to them, is going to be directly tied to their body composition. Okay. Now with this, we need to have an understanding of what body composition is. Okay. So body composition will refer to a person's proportion of fat, lean tissue, and water. Okay, so that lean tissue is going to be made up of bone, muscle, and connective tissue. Okay, now when we look at fat mass, we have to look at two different types that this can include. It can include our essential fat and our non-essential fat. Okay, so our essential fat is going to be the fat that is required for normal body functioning. Yes, we do require fat for normal body functioning. Okay, so that essential fat is basically going to make up our brain, nerves, heart, lungs, and liver. Okay, so that's what we need for normal functioning. Now, this percentage for men is going to be anywhere from 3 to 5%, with about 12 to 14% for women. Okay, now women do need a higher percent of essential fat because we have menstruation, we have childbearing, and we have lactation, which all require a little bit greater percentage of fat than men who do not require these things. Okay, now when looking at our non-essential fats, these are primarily triglycerides that will be stored in our muscle tissue. It'll be stored around our organs, and it will also be stored within our subcutaneous tissue. Now, this is the fat that we don't really want to accumulate, okay? This is the fat that we normally get through the consumption of fatty foods, okay? So we don't want to store a lot of fat in our muscle tissue. When we see it around our vital organs, that's when we usually see a lot of kind of chronic diseases taking place, and also within our subcutaneous tissue. Okay, so essential fat, the one we need, non-essential, the one we kind of want to limit. Again, that essential fat number for men is anywhere between 3 to 5% that is necessary, and 12 to 14% for women. Okay, now when we are determining body composition of our athletes, okay, there are some modifiable and non-modifiable factors that we have to take into account, okay? Again, those modifiable factors are going to be the things that we can change, along with those non-modifiable ones that we cannot change, okay? So the things that we can change when understanding body composition is fitness training regimen and dietary habits. And these are going to have a big indication on the amount of muscle mass and the amount of body fat of our athletes. Now, changing up a fitness training program or dietary habits will have an effect on an individual's body composition. Okay. Now, when looking at those non-modifiable factors, we see that there's gender. Okay, again, we see the male and female. Females will genetically have a little bit more body fat than men. Okay, it's the makeup. It's a non-modifiable factor that comes with the hormones that are produced in the body. We also see ethnicity does have an effect on our body composition. Okay, our somatotype, are otherwise known as our body type. Kind of what are we, a mesomorph, endomorph, an ectomorph, which we'll discuss on the next slide. Right? And it also talks about the distribution of our muscle fibers. Or do we have more type 1 versus type 2 muscle fibers? Okay, so all these things are things that we are not able to change. A lot of them are genetic. Age is also in there. You know, we can't subtract our age. We can't get any younger. So these things we cannot change, as opposed to the fitness and or the training that we get and the dietary habits that we have, which have a huge effect over our body composition. Okay. Now I did mention our somatotype. Okay, so our somatotype is going to be genetically determined. Okay, and that's just basically how our body is structured. Our body type is structured. Okay. Now, if we have the mesomorph structure, this is the one that we see that is most conducive to athletic performance. Okay, in the mesomorph, you have really high metabolism. We usually see a lot of low body fat, and the propensity to gain more muscle. Okay, so mesomorph is kind of the one that you'll see most commonly in our well-structured athletes. Okay, and then you have endomorph and also ectomorph. Now, with this, if we have a very strategic fitness training program and a nutrition program that is designed for a specific body type, we can see that we can actually optimize an athlete's genetic potential. Okay, so if we do have someone who is more mesomorphically structured, we can design training programs to actually optimize that genetic potential and get the best out of their performance or see them succeed at a different level than if we weren't kind of feeding into that specific body type that they do have. Okay, now this is where our assessment methods will come into play kind of most importantly, okay, as we see, once we figure out what our body type is for our athlete and we see kind of where the distribution of their fat and their muscle lies, we can better cater nutrition programs to help them either maintain their weight, either lose maybe a little bit of weight if they need to, or actually even gain muscle mass. Okay, so this is where we can kind of play around with their training, play around with their nutrition, and see what would be best for them to optimize whatever their goal is in relation to their body composition. Okay, so let's talk about a few assessment methods that we can use most commonly in the field of nutrition and even into kinesiology. Okay, so we do have some field methods. And we do have some laboratory techniques that we'll go over, but first we'll talk about the field methods. Okay, so our field methods will be our most widely used methods. They are usually a lot easier to perform, okay? We don't need a lot of specialized equipment. They're usually a lot more cost effective and just not a lot, not, I guess, specific training will be necessary for most of them. Okay, the first one that we have listed here is our height and weight charts. Okay, and basically what this is going to do is it's going to take the individual and put them into classifications based on their weight, height, and their frame size. Okay, so again, looking kind of not at the percentage of fat or muscle mass that they have, but really an indication based on how much they weigh, how tall they are, and what type of frame do they have. Are they small frame? Do they have more of a bigger or what we would more commonly call big bone frame? What is their structure? Okay, and we can classify individuals as underweight, normal weight, or overweight based on these three categories. Okay, the next one that we have, we've already mentioned it, it is that body mass index. Okay, and this is something that can be used to replace those height weight charts. Okay, it can give a better indication or a better estimation of an individual's body composition just looking at their weight and divided by their height in meters squared. Okay, now when we're looking at the ranges for body mass index, it's important to know what would be classified as underweight, normal weight, overweight, or obese. Okay, for an individual to be classified as underweight, their BMI will be less than 18.5. For an individual to be classified as normal weight, their BMI will be anywhere between 18.5 and less than 25. Okay, for an individual to be considered overweight, we'll see that that individual's BMI is going to be greater than or equal to 25. And an obese individual's BMI will be anywhere that is greater than or equal to 30. Okay, again, underweight will be less than 18.5. Normal is 18.5 to less than 25. Overweight is greater than or equal to 25. and obese will be greater than or equal to 30. Okay, again, keep in mind that this is not actually assessing their fat mass or their lean mass or their water weight. Okay, this is strictly looking at what is their weight compared to their height. Okay, the next field method that we can use is what we call waist to hip ratio. And basically what this gives us is that waist circumference compared to their hip circumference, okay? So this is gonna help us give an indication of basically body fat distribution. Okay, so we have something that we would call an android shape. Okay, so an android shape individual would be those individuals that have more of an apple shape. Okay, so that would be where they have more of their fat mass, or they're larger in mass in their abdominal section. Okay, so they can kind of constitute more of a apple shape as compared to more of that gynoid shape or that pear shape where you would carry more of your weight in the hip area. Okay, so when looking at the waist to hip ratio, any ratio greater than 1 is going to give an increased risk of health problems. Okay, and basically what that means is that it will be indicative of that abdominal obesity or that larger abdominal area. So really looking at more of that apple shape compared to more of that pear shaped where the weight is carried more in the hip area. Okay, so again, ratio greater than 1, indicative of abdominal obesity, more of that android or apple shape compared to the gynoid or the pear shaped. Okay, and this is going to indicate a risk of health problems. Okay, so it's not necessarily that the individual will have some sort of chronic disease or chronic health problems, but it just indicates an increase in the risk for developing those disorders. Okay. The next field method that we'll talk about are girth measures. Okay, and basically with our girth measures, we are measuring the circumference of a specific area, a specific muscle, okay, or a specific limb. So this could be, measuring the arm around the bicep area, measuring the thigh. You're looking at the girth measurement, okay? So when we are applying these types of measurements, you are using a measuring tape. It's applied lightly to the surface. It's pulled taut but not super tight on the muscle, so it should be, or on the body part rather. It should be not sinking into the skin at all, but really lying flat on top, and getting just what that measurement is of the circumference of that area of the body. Okay. This can be useful for both recreational and elite exercisers, excuse me. And we do usually use girth measurements when we want to see if any type of weight loss has taken place in specific areas, measuring maybe centimeters or inches lost in that area, or if we're looking at hypertrophy or muscle gain and we want to see if that area has actually increased in size. Okay. We also see our circumference measurements, which will be very similar to our girth measurements. And we usually use our circumference measurements to calculate body density. Okay. Now, when we're looking at body density, we are looking at basically kind of more of that body makeup of how much fat mass, how much muscle mass we have. I mentioned earlier that muscle will always weigh more than fat. It will be more dense than fat. Okay, so if you have a higher body density, then we can see that you will probably have a higher muscle mass. Okay, so with using the circumference measurements, we can use some various calculations looking at body density to convert that into a body fat percentage once we know how dense the body is. Okay, these methods are very minimally invasive. It's basically just using a tape measure. It can be used on very thin, very muscular, or very obese individuals. So basically it can be used on anyone to measure those circumference measurements and get a kind of estimation or a more reliable estimation of their body fat percentage and their actual body composition. Okay, the next field method that we'll talk about is bioelectrical impedance analysis, or what we call BIA. And this basically uses what we call algorithms or complex mathematical formulations that look at the electrical current as it's passing through muscles compared to that compared to as those same currents passing through fat. Okay, so it's going to provide a report of that lean body mass compared to the fat mass. Okay, one thing to point out with our BIA analysis is that the measurement will rely heavily on adequate hydration. Okay, so if an individual is a little bit dehydrated, we'll see that those numbers are a little bit off due to that electrical current not flowing properly. Okay, so again, if we see that the electrical current is passing through muscle, we'll see that it actually passes faster as compared to fat, where it will pass slower. Okay, so these devices can use the algorithm created to actually give an indication based on how fast or how slow the electrical current will pass through the body. Okay, it's not the most reliable piece of equipment, I will say that, unless it is research grade. Okay, so there are some BIA devices that you can purchase online or from, maybe health stores or sports stores out there that are handheld or that are part of your scale where you place your feet on them. Those again may not be your most accurate, but they can still give you a good indication within a margin of error. Okay, but you must always remember that there is a margin of error associated. Next, we're going to look at our skin folds. Now, our skin fold measurements are a very good indication of your body composition. Okay, we do use our skin fold measurements to look at the amount of subcutaneous fat. Okay, remember, subcutaneous fat is going to be part of that non-essential fat that we have in our body. So as we increase in fat mass, we usually do increase in subcutaneous fat. So this can give us a good estimation of what that percentage of fat is in our body. Okay, we do measure our skin folds with skin fold calipers. It is a special device that we use especially for this type of field assessment. The only kind of downside to using skin folds is that you do need to be trained. Okay, there are various sites around the body. Usually we do them in a sum of 7 skin fold sites, and you need to be trained on how to locate those sites, how to isolate the subcutaneous tissue, and get an accurate measurement with the calipers. Okay, so we usually do use the sum of those several sites. It can be 7 sites, it can be 3 sites. Most allied health professionals do use the 3-site method, whereas we see at the Olympic level, they use the 7-site method. Okay, the 7-site method is going to give that, I guess, greater accuracy in total body fat distribution because it's using more sites than just the regular 3-fold site. Okay, when we're looking at the 3-fold sites, for men, we usually use the chest, thigh, and abdomen. With women, we usually use the triceps, thigh, and the supraspinale. Right? If we were using a 7-site method, again, that will have more accuracy based on full body distribution of body fat. In the 7-site method, we use the abdomen, the biceps, the anterior thigh, medial calf, subscapular, supraspinale, and the triceps. Okay, again, the abdomen, biceps, anterior thigh, medial calf, subscapular, supraspinale, and triceps. Okay, once we have those skin fold sites, we do use specialized equations, plug them in based on gender, height, and age, and out comes a percentage of body fat estimation. Okay. Now we do use our skin fold sites as a marker to assess progress within a training program. So we can either compare it to norms or we can compare it to a baseline of an individual to see if they're reaching their goals of either decreasing their body fat or increasing their muscle mass. Okay, one other thing that I will say about our skin fold measurements is that it is the method that is most often used for body composition assessments. Okay, skin folds is our most often used field method. Here on this slide, you can see we do have some equations, and these are the equations that we would use for those skin fold sites. Okay, they are called the Jackson-Pollock equations for measuring skin folds, and we do have specific ones for men and women. Okay, and basically what this will give us is it will give us an indication of our body density. And once we have our body density, then we can indicate percent body fat based on the final equation here listed at the bottom of the screen. So that percent body fat is equal to 4.95 divided by the body density minus 4.5 times 100. Okay, again, you can see that it's based on the sum of those sites in millimeters, and we also look at the age and years of the individual. Okay, and that is the end of our field methods. Okay, so next we'll move on to our laboratory methods. Okay, now like I said before, a lot of times we do just resort to those field methods because they are easier to use, they're less expensive, they're a little bit more practical. But what we see with our laboratory methods is that we do have lower rates of error when we're establishing our percentage of body fat or looking at overall body composition. Okay, so they may be very expensive and they may not be practical for all facilities, but especially for research purposes, our laboratory methods will give us the best indication of actual body fat percentage or actual body composition of the individual. Okay, so the first type that we're going to talk about when we're looking at our assessment methods is hydrostatic weighing. Okay, now hydrostatic weighing is the gold standard of laboratory methods for our body composition assessments. Okay, so this is basically the best tool that we have, the gold standard in measuring body composition. Okay, now basically what happens with hydrostatic weighing, also called underwater weighing, is we do have an athlete seated in a chair that is on a scale and is submerged in a tank of water. Okay, so once that individual is comfortable and on the chair that's located in the tank, we will basically have the individual go underwater. They will exhale all of their air. Okay, so we want to make sure that we clear the body of any air that could possibly interfere with their body density calculation. We will measure body density based on the weight that we see on the scale. And then we will look at that and compare that to the relationship of the person's weight on land. Okay, so we're looking at their weight on land compared with their weight in water. Once their body density is established, then we can use that same body density equation as we did with the skin folds to calculate their percent body fat. Okay, so if I go back to the slide here, well, it's not letting me go back, but it's that body fat percent with the 4.95 divided by the body density minus the 4.5 times 100. Okay, so that's how we would use hydrostatic weighing. And again, that is our gold standard. That is the way, the best laboratory method that we do have to actually assess our body composition. Okay, the next method that we're going to talk about is air displacement plasmography. Okay, and this is what we call ADP. Okay, now this is going to be whole body air displacement. Okay, and what we're going to be measuring with this is the body volume and the body density of an individual. Okay, I don't know if anyone has ever heard of something called the bod pod. Okay, but that's what our air displacement plasmography is. Okay, so it's really looking at kind of when you're looking at your body volume and kind of how much space you take up and how much displacement in the air that you have. Okay, now this type of laboratory assessment is very quick. It's not very invasive. Usually individuals just step into the bod pod and they're able to breathe into a device to make sure, again, that we are getting an accurate reading. And it's good for a range of people. Okay, so if you're looking for a quick estimate of body composition, air displacement plasmography is going to be a good choice for you. Right? The next method we have is dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. Okay, and this is going to be one of our upcoming ways that we can measure body composition. Okay, next to that hydrostatic weighing, we see the DEXA is going to be kind of the next way that we would want to measure our body composition. Okay, so what we see here is that what it gives us is a full body X-ray that maps out the bone density, maps out your fat mass, maps out your fat-free tissue mass, and kind of gives us that best indication of body composition throughout the body. Okay. Now with this, it is using low dose of X-rays from different sources, so we're really going to get a good measurement of that bone and soft tissue mass simultaneously. Okay, so this is why it's kind of one of those better ways of looking at it and is right up there with the hydrostatic weighing. Okay, so dual X-ray absorptiometry, we're getting not just the fat mass and not just the fat-free tissue, so that muscle mass, we can also get an indication of bone density. Okay, the next two lab methods that we're going to talk about, near-infrared interactance and three-dimensional photonic scanning. Now these types, I'm not going to want you guys to know a whole lot about them because they're not used as often as any of the others, but what I do want you to know is basically what they do. Okay, so the near-infrared interactants are going to basically record optical densities of skin, fat, and lean tissue with an infrared light probe. Okay, it's going to be reflected off the bone and back to the probe. Okay, so really looking at that infrared light. Again, it's not very widely used and it does have a very high rate of error. Okay, so not one of our best laboratory techniques. Three-dimensional photonic scanning is when we use a low-power laser light and digital cameras to rapidly produce a 3D model of the human body. Okay, so basically creating that three-dimensional image of your body based on, you know, kind of what the body composition distribution is throughout the body. Okay, and our last laboratory method that we can use is ultrasound. Now, ultrasound is very inexpensive, it's portable, it's safe to use, So it is one of the type of laboratory techniques that might be getting a little bit more use in the coming years. Okay, basically what it does is it does use ultrasound waves to penetrate tissue. As the wave is reflected, it's reflected in various ways for fat mass, lean mass, and bone, which gives us an indication of the composition of all three of those in the body, which can give us an indication of percent body fat compared to percent lean tissue. Okay, again, it's being used more and more as it is very practical. It has a very high accuracy rate. It's very easy and it's very mobile. Okay, so we can basically move it from place to place. It's not very bulky, not very heavy. Okay. So those are our ways that we can look at body composition. Okay, so make sure that you guys familiarize yourself with all of the field methods. Make sure you familiarize yourself with all of the laboratory methods. Know the pros and cons of each and the basic definitions of each. Now, when we're looking at body composition and we're monitoring it and we're looking at an individual's ideal weight, it is important to note that body composition methods do require frequent monitoring to be accurate, okay? So we want to make sure that if we do have an individual where we're trying to see some kind of alteration in their body composition, for example, having an athlete that wants to increase their muscle mass, we will need to have a baseline of their body composition, and then all throughout their training regimen, okay, we need to be having specific time frame markers where we do reassess their body composition to make sure that the regimen that we have applied is actually the correct regimen for what the outcome we want, okay? Also, as a proxy, one can use ideal body weight to kind of monitor this body composition change. Okay, when we do this, we are assuming all weight loss is coming from from muscle mass, and that individual must engage in strength or resistance training. Okay, so really, when we're looking at ideal body weight, there are some assumptions that must be made. So as a nutrition professional, my recommendation would actually be to just assess body composition as you go forth, okay, as you go forward with your training regimen, okay? But ideal body weight can be used if you're making these assumptions. Okay, now along with body composition assessment, nutrition assessment is also something that is extremely important when we are looking at the weight maintenance strategies and keeping that neutral energy balance for our individuals, or having that muscle mass gain or the weight loss, whatever is necessary for our athletes. Okay, when we're looking at body composition or losing weight or maintaining weight, nutrition is about 80% of the outcome, okay? About 20% is going to depend upon physical activity, okay? So nutrition is going to be that most important factor when looking at weight maintenance strategies, okay? Now, when we're looking at a nutrition assessment, it is the evaluation of an individual's nutritious status and their unique nutritional needs. Okay, it's always important to note that not any two individuals will have the exact same unique nutritional needs. Okay, so it is important to assess them very thoroughly, look at their risks, look at their body composition, and make sure that we are giving them a program that is going to meet those needs. Okay, we always want to make sure that our athletes or our clients are nutritionally adequate in what they are consuming. Okay. Now, when we are performing a nutritional assessment, these are best completed by a registered dietitian. Okay. So if you do not pursue that RD route as an individual, and you have athletes that are needing nutritional assessment, you want to make sure that you do refer them to a registered dietitian so that the nutritional assessment could be most accurate and most thorough. Okay, again, because we want to make sure that we are feeding these individuals properly so that we don't see any deficiencies coming up as they're either losing or gaining weight or maintaining their weight status. Okay. When we are performing a nutritional assessment, we want to make sure that we are estimating their caloric needs properly. Okay. One thing that we want to make sure that we indicate is their resting energy expenditure, okay, or otherwise known as their REE. And this is going to be the basic caloric needs of the individual to fuel their vital functions, okay? So this is without any physical activity, okay? This is what they need to just basically live, okay? This is breathing, this is GI things occurring in the body. This is just basic vital functions of the individual. The way that we measure our REE is through indirect calorimetry. Okay, so this is a very non-invasive way to measure estimate our energy needs, and it is based on the use of oxygen and production of carbon dioxide. Okay, so as we intake food, we can look at that level of use of oxygen and the production of carbon dioxide to actually see how many calories we are burning. Okay, this is a very expensive and impractical way to look at it. And so a lot of times estimation is via um, estimation via calculations is a lot more efficient for estimating caloric needs. However, if you do have the ability to assess it in the indirect way, that will give you more of a accurate reading of their resting energy expenditure. Okay, but before we can estimate any caloric needs in relation to physical activity, we need to know how much they need, how much energy they need just to basically live. Okay, and then once we have that, we can add on top of that how much energy they will need to perform their physical activity functions, and thus we should get their total caloric content need. Okay, we also have to get their diet history. Okay, so this will give us a baseline about the client or the athlete's typical eating habits. Okay, so again, wanting to make sure that we are getting insight into the types of food that they eat, factors that influence their intake. Do they eat when they're bored? Do they only eat when they're hungry? Those types of things. It'll also give us an idea of the quality of nutritional intake. So what types of foods they're eating, how much macronutrients they're getting, which macronutrient they're getting, and it can allow us to refer them to a dietitian if it's necessary. Okay, so diet history is really going to give us that indication of kind of, are they eating properly already? What types of things are they eating? What types of behavioral changes might need to be taken into account when considering their nutrition plan for maintaining their weight, losing weight, etc. Okay. When we think about diet history, there are several ways that we can look at it, or several different types of diet history questionnaire recalls that we can do to get the information that we do need for the diet history. Okay, one way to do it is what we call a 24-hour recall. And basically, what the individual will do in this case is they will provide you with a detailed list about what they've eaten within a 24-hour period. Okay. Now, I will say, as with all diet history questionnaires or ways to record food intake, they're not always accurate. Okay. A lot of times individuals maybe forget what they've eaten, maybe they don't want to be as honest with you as they should be because they're maybe a little bit shameful of what they did eat and they want to make it look like they've eaten a little bit more healthy. So not always accurate, but does provide some insight into what that individual may have eaten over the past 24 hours, okay? And then we can use this to kind of look at it, establish a baseline, and then go from there, okay? The next one that we have is a food frequency questionnaire, okay? And this is going to give a little bit more information than the 24-hour recall because it's going to be kind of like a multi-page questionnaire or list with questions for the individual to answer based on not just what types of food they're consuming, but how often they consume each food, okay? So ask specific questions of, how often or do you eat rice products? How often do you eat rice products? Once a week, twice a week, once a month, etc. Okay, so this does give you kind of an insight into not just what they're eating, but how often do they consume those products. Okay, and it gives you more than just a 24-hour period. But again, with the food frequency questionnaires, a lot of times individuals may not even realize how often they're eating a certain food, so we may see some discrepancies there as well. Okay. And the last type of diet history that we can collect is what we call a food record. And this is going to be the most frequently used type of diet history that we find. Okay. It gives us a little bit more information than the 24-hour recall, but not as detailed information or kind of as extensive information as those questionnaires. Okay. So again, it is the most frequently used. A lot of times it can range anywhere between a 3, 5, or 7-day record. A lot of times they keep them at a minimum of 3-day just because it's a lot easier for the individual to remember. When we get to more of our 5 or 7-day food records, that's when we usually recommend that the individual keep a log each and every day so that we're not having to, make them recall after a week, oh, what did you eat, 7 days ago? Okay, so usually with the 7 days, we want to make sure that we're keeping a record of every day they're logging in what they're eating as opposed to recalling it at the end. Okay, so again, this is where we keep a log of everything that's consumed. So that would be any of the food that they consume along with beverages, what time they ate it, where they were when they were eating it. Were they at the dinner table? Were they in front of the TV? Were they driving? Were they at work at their desk? Wherever it may have been. And then again, how hungry were they when they were eating? Okay, so did they wait till the end of the day and it was their first meal and they were completely famished? Whereas it something they weren't really hungry, but they were sitting in front of the TV and eating chips or eating popcorn just seemed like a logical choice. Okay, this is the type of information that you want to gain from that food record. Okay, again, we keep it at a minimum of 3 days because we want to be able to have at least one weekend day in there. Okay, a lot of times individuals do eat differently on the weekend. So with a 3-day food record, we can have maybe 2 weekdays and a weekend day thrown in there. With a 5-day food record, you may want to include 2 weekend days. And again, with the 7-day food record, you would see all 7 days in there. That would consist of all weekend days and all weekdays. Okay. Now, for your dietary food diary and recall and questionnaire, this is the type of food record you will need to keep, and it will be a 7-day food record. Again, there will be a template for you online to follow. So it will have a space for you to enter the day of the week, what the date was, what time you ate certain things, what did you eat, how many calories was in it if you know the caloric content. Hopefully you guys will be able to provide that caloric content, and also kind of how you felt when you were eating it. And also there will be a space on there to put physical activity if any was performed. Okay, so again, 7-day food record, making sure that you record everything you've eaten, what time, where it was eaten, and how hungry you were, etc. Okay, this is what will be necessary for that food diary assignment. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about comparing needs to their present intake. Okay, so you've done the body composition assessment, you've looked at their nutritional intake, but how do we actually take those needs and compare it to what they're currently eating? Okay, so our athletes' nutritional goals will form the basis for comparing their needs to intake. Okay, so if their goal is to gain 10 pounds of muscle, or if their goal is to cut weight to make a weight class, we have to make sure that we're meeting those nutritional goals with with the intake that we are giving them. Okay, MyPlate recommendation and supertracker.usda.gov are very good resources to use when you're looking at intake and kind of deciding what those recommendations should be. Okay, so really what you want to look at is the client's own eating plan compared to what they're actually eating. Okay, so that's where the 24-hour recall and the food diary and the food recalls come into play. Okay, now when you're deciding on a nutritional plan for an individual, an ideal eating plan is going to be one that is healthy and easy to follow. We don't want to make an eating plan very time consuming or very difficult, because it has been shown that if you cannot accomplish the goal with a moderate amount of effort, that behavior change most likely will not take place. Okay, so what we see is that making the plan very easy to follow, very practical, is going to help the individuals succeed in accomplishing the goal that you set forth for them. Okay, also be careful when helping the client with a non-government endorsed eating plan, especially if you are a registered dietitian. Though anything outside of those guidelines, and if you do recommend anything outside of those guidelines and the individual gets hurt with that, or there is some kind of contraindication there, that could fall back on you. So also be careful when making those recommendations. We want to make sure that we are staying inside the guidelines that have been set forth. Okay, when looking at body composition and nutrition coaching, body composition and nutrition assessment tools will help form the basis for which the athlete's going to develop their goals and how they're going to achieve those goals. So really, as the coach or as the motivation behind everything, you are there to help set and achieve those goals for the individual. Again, if there's any moment where you kind of, not that you lack the information or you feel like more assessment or more information is needed for the individual because of either contraindications or risk factors, you may want to make sure that you do refer them to a physician or registered dietitian so that they can get the adequate assessment so that we can make the proper recommendations for these individuals. Okay, and one of the last things that I do want to talk about is readiness to change. Okay, and I mentioned earlier that if an individual is not, or if the plan that you've set forth for the individual is not moderately or they're able to achieve it with a moderate amount of effort, then that behavior is going to be very difficult for them to change. Okay, so when we are thinking of different goals for our clients and for our athletes in relation to weight maintenance or weight gain or weight loss, we want to assess their readiness to change. Now, with athletes, they normally recognize that improvements in exercise and nutrition are very essential to their success. Okay, so with athletes, it's not very hard to convince them that some type of behavior change needs to take place. They usually recognize this, they're usually motivated, self-motivated, and it's usually a lot easier to get them to stay on some sort of diet regimen and exercise regimen. Okay, now when you're working with an everyday individual, this might be a little bit more, this might be a little harder for you to get them to recognize that there needs to have this specific change. Okay, because when we look at this specific change, they're going to require changes in everyday lifestyle. It's not just going to be one little aspect. Okay, it's going to be a lifestyle. Getting healthy, maintaining weight, staying active is a lifestyle change. Okay, so in this, it's going to require a readiness to make changes. Now, when you are helping individuals set goals, you want to make sure that you are setting SMART goals. Okay, so these are goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Okay, so when you're setting a goal, making it specific, you want to make sure that you are outlining exactly what you hope for them to achieve or what they hope to achieve. Okay, making sure that it's not ambiguous and that they know exactly what they are shooting for in this goal. To make the goal measurable, you need to have an indication of how you will know if the athlete, if the individual has achieved the goal. Okay, so how will you measure it? How will you know if that individual has actually gotten to the point where the goal has been achieved? Next, you want to assess if the goal is attainable. Okay, and this is basically, is this goal realistically achieved with that moderate amount of effort? Okay, so if it cannot be achieved with a moderate amount of effort, this goal is most likely not attainable for that individual, because again, if it does require more than that moderate amount of effort, it will be less likely that that behavior will be changed. Or you want to make sure that it's relevant. Okay, so when that individual achieves that goal, how will it make them feel? Will they feel accomplished? Will they, have the body image that they want? Will they have the body composition that they want? Does it mean anything to them? And then time bound. You want to make sure that you have an amount of time that you want to achieve the goal in. Okay, so making sure that you give an indication of, you're going to lose 10 pounds in 6 months. Is that attainable? Is that relevant? How will you measure it? Okay, so making sure that you're designing a SMART goal for individuals so that we can actually help these individuals achieve that goal in a more logical fashion. Okay, and then lastly, when we're looking at body composition, nutritional assessment, and making goals for individuals, we want to make sure that we're always following up with our clients, following up with our athletes. Allied health professionals should regularly assess their progress, provide continual information to their individual, making sure that they're staying on top of current research, also providing motivation and reassurance for the individuals. Just making sure that that goal is being maintained or being they're continually trying to accomplish that goal. Okay, some follow-up methods that you can use. You can do individual consultation. You can do online communication. A lot of times people do support groups, discussion boards online where there can be constant discussion going, constant motivation. They don't feel like they're alone in their goal. And also different types of workshops to help the individuals continue along and have that behavior change actually take place in their lives. Okay, so that's the end of the audio lecture for this week. So make sure that you are checking in on all of the assignments that are posted. Again, if you guys have any questions about anything that we covered today, please feel free to shoot me an email, jduhon@csusm.edu. All right, talk to you guys next week.